Good. All right, good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call together the November 16th, 2023 school committee meeting. If you would rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. This evening we have a consent agenda posted, as well as we have the minutes from the October 26, 2023 meeting, the oath of bills and payroll. Is there a motion to accept?
We accept consent agenda
And the minutes?
and minutes.
And the oath of bills and payroll?
And the oath of bills and payroll.
Motion made,
Second.
seconded by Jen. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Perfect. This is our first opportunity for interested citizens. So if there's anybody before us this evening, either in person or on Zoom, that would like to speak before the school committee, now's your first crack at it. So if you have someone, if you would name and address for the record, please.
David Gianetta, 37 Spartan Arrow Road. Before I get started, I'd like to just distribute a few photos. And I'd like to place a wager that no one will be offended by these photos. You may even smile. So, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I safely say that I speak on behalf of, I would say, over 100 residents that in a short amount of time, we've been able to get together and communicate this topic that I'm about to speak of now. So the parents of Russell Street, and forgive me if I read this because I want to contain all my thoughts and not forget what to say here. So I've prepared this for this evening. Parents of Russell Street School received an email from Cheryl Temple on Tuesday, 11/14 at 1:21 p.m. informing the Russell Street School families that Wacky Hair Day has been changed to Wacky Hat Day. This has been a tradition for over 30 years. And I say that because my wife, Stacy, who was born and raised here in Littleton, remembers Wacky Hair Day when she was in grade school here in Littleton. For those who did not receive the email that was sent, I'd like to quickly just read the 2-paragraph email, which informed parents that the tradition of Wacky Hair Day was canceled. Dear RSS families, it has come to our attention that we may have inadvertently offended members of our school community by including Wacky Hair Day in our Spirit Week schedule. Please know that our 3rd grade students and teachers brainstormed and voted on the events for this year's Spirit Week and in no way meant to upset or exclude anyone. In keeping with our commitment for diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have decided to change Thursday's theme to Wacky Hat Day. Students and staff are invited to decorate and wear a wacky hat of their choice. We appreciate the possibility and support. So the reason I'm here this evening is to discuss with the school committee, who I believe is an advisory board to the Littleton Public Schools, about the decision that was made by the faculty and DEI committee, which I've now learned that consists, the DEI committee within Russell Street School consists of 2 teachers who are also part of the committee to come up with Spirit Week themes, i.e. Wacky Hair Day. And it was this group who helped to cancel Wacky Hair Day. So Stacy and I had a chance yesterday to meet with Mrs. Temple and Mrs. Romano to discuss this matter. During the meeting, it was brought to our attention that an article was sent to Mrs. Temple, which implied that Wacky Hair Day has inadvertently offended members of the school community. We had requested a copy of that article to be sent to us, and Mrs. Temple obliged. So once reading it, to our surprise, the article was barely anything of much substance and was strongly opinion-based. It was written by Kimmy Fink, who's a senior editor for We Are Teachers. The reference within the article to Crazy Hair Day, I'd like to just read that. It's pretty short. So within the article, it refers to Crazy Hair Day. On Crazy Hair Day, students are generally invited to wear their hair in a wild or wacky fashion. The problem is that many of the hairstyles popular on Crazy Hair Day are cultural hairstyles for Black people. In deeming those styles crazy, we send the message that there's something wrong with them. It's a microaggression, but it's also part of the hidden curriculum that makes whiteness the norm. And let's not forget that Black girls are disproportionately policed and disciplined for how they wear their hair. So, in reading that, you know, our expectation was that there would have been more time put into a decision like this to cancel a tradition that's been around for over 30 years. The question is, were all the available resources utilized to make this decision? I ask this question because I believe the decision to cancel Wacky Hair Day was news to even the school committee. And the decision was made in a little more than 24 hours after this article was received, which helped to initiate that decision. So as such, we created a petition because it seems like in Littleton, the only thing to get everybody's attention is get 100 signatures if you can do it. So that's what we did. We created a petition, and mind you, this was only started 12 hours ago. I'd like to read the petition just so you're aware of what was being distributed and what has been signed. A petition to reinstate Wacky Hair Day at Russell Street School. Our daughter, Ada, like many other children in Littleton, is a student at Russell Street School. The DEI committee and faculty have recently decided to cancel Wacky Hair Day as part of their Spirit Week. This decision has left many children, including my own, disappointed and disheartened. Wacky Hair Day is more than just a fun day. It's an opportunity for students to express their creativity and individuality. It fosters an environment of acceptance and inclusivity where every child can feel comfortable being themselves. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, such activities play a crucial role in promoting mental health among children by boosting their self-esteem. Moreover, this event has been celebrated for years without a reported issue or problem. It's hard to understand why it was suddenly deemed unnecessary or inappropriate. In a society where our children have experienced a significant amount of cancel culture, we believe that the reinstatement of Wacky Hair Day would not only bring joy back into our children's lives, but also contribute positively towards building their character and confidence. We urged the school authorities in Littleton to reconsider this decision and bring back Wacky Hair Day. So to that regard, we did not receive the 100 goal. However, we did receive 84 in about 11 hours. But I can say over 100 folks have responded saying that they're in support. And if needed, we can get over 100 signatures. I'd like to just close my comments with this question and then open it up to the board for discussion if everybody's open to that. If we could gather 84 signatures for a petition to retract the decision by the RSS faculty to cancel Wacky Hair Day in less than 12 hours, how was the school able to make this decision to cancel Wacky Hair Day in roughly a 24 to 30 hour time frame and only having consulted with, I'm going to guess and assume, less than 10 people, majority of which are not Littleton residents? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I would like the administration the opportunity to respond, and then I'd also like to offer the school committee a chance to respond as well. But before we do that, I just want to see if there's anyone else that would like to speak on a similar topic, just so that we can get all the information at once.
Maggie Buckley, Long Lake. I didn't intend on coming to speak, but more so support what it is that Dave presented. And discussing this at home. My concern also, I just feel like it should be noted and discussed with all of you and the parents who are also on the board. This is a great learning opportunity for all of us. The knee-jerk reaction to just cancel the celebration and the tradition rather than take a little bit more time. It's a real slippery slope. And that's my concern. Backing and supporting also what was already shared. I won't, repeat everything that he already said. My bigger concern was what about, it is in no intent of any other household that I've spoken with, friends, residents, to ever make offense, especially referencing the article that was shared in reference to. That would never be an intent in our district, in our community, but to keep the tradition and then use that as a great tool to discuss in classrooms with students what the expectations are. It's a conversation to have at home. But would we potentially start canceling other traditions? Because what it could potentially offend. I think it's a real concerning area that we need to think about.
Thank you very much. Perfect. So it doesn't appear to be anybody else here to speak on that topic. I just will pause for a second and see if anyone at home wants to speak on that topic. Okay. Why don't we start to see and we do have one. Okay. Perfect. Matthew Ridge.
Yes. Matthew Ridge? Matthew, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I just got unmuted. Thank you.
Okay, could you say your street, please?
Yes, Matthew Ridge, 325 Great Road. I saw this letter as well, and I was wondering, again, it happened quickly, like you said, within 24 hours. And I'm glad somebody else brought this up because this is one of these things that I feel, I hate to use the word I feel because that's one of the problems I have with DEI in general is that it's based off of feelings. And especially with this article that came through, it's everybody feels that this does offends somebody. And as it has been pointed out, nobody got to have actually a response. A majority of people did not get a response. It was a minority. And it was one committee that never reached out to anybody, as far as I know, because I received the letter. I never got another request asking, does this offend us? Does this bother us? Does this anything? And I would like to see if it is at all possible that any decision based off of DEI or a community or that has such a wide reach like this, because as has been explained, this has been something that's been going on for 30 odd years. I'd like to know who was offended, because the people that I've spoken to, nobody's offended. Everybody was waiting for this. Everybody was expecting to have fun with this. And then we get the letter and then it's like, whatever. But it just seems like we need to have a balance here. We need to have somebody say, okay, this is brought to our attention. The school committee has to vote on this or something. We just can't have a group just say, well, we don't want it because it offends people. Everything's going to offend people. And we need to have that balance where it is a perceived insult versus an actual insult, like a microaggression. I'm sorry, what is a microaggression? I mean, you tell somebody that they're wrong, that could be considered a microaggression in the right district, in the right situation. We need to have, instead of canceling something outright, like it was explained, within 24 hours, we need to have a conversation. We just can't allow 3 to 5 people, even 10 people, have the entire school say, okay, it's done. Unless they have been elected in by the people, which I don't think this committee was. I don't know, but that was just my 2 cents. I'm not as eloquent as everybody else has been here, but it's just, it bothers me when I hear that EID or EDI has been utilized to actually get this canceled, because EDI is becoming more and more into our community, and it is becoming more and more difficult to actually do the things we used to do because it's going to offend somebody. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. See if there's anybody else. Not seeing anyone else. I think it would be probably most appropriate to just start to see if perhaps the administration wants to, it's not always necessary for there to be a response for public comment, but I think in this case, a response is warranted, largely in part because, well, the email served a purpose to inform the student body of a change. There really was, I felt like some folks felt like there wasn't a great enough explanation and we're left wondering with more questions than answers. So
Sure.
why don't we start and hear from Superintendent Clenchey?
Yep, I'll start, excuse me, the conversation off, and then I'll hand it over to Mrs. Temple and Central Office DEI team members. First of all, thank you for coming out tonight and speaking. We want to continue to work with our communities. We're not alone in this venture of cultural proficiency. Every school across this nation has been charged with that responsibility. We have spent the past 3 years training our staff, our administrators, and how do we move our schools forward with cultural proficiency, making sure that all of our students feel a sense of belonging and acceptance. We don't take these decisions lightly. Our intent is to serve all students. So, I feel bad that we have some parents that feel that we mistreated the situation. The intent of the school was not to do that. The intent of the school was to advocate for minority populations that don't have a voice. Littleton has changed significantly during the last 30 years. We have far more diversity in this school system. When I had a conversation with a parent the other day about this, it was really interesting because they were quick to say that we need to educate our students to deal with situations beyond the town of Littleton. We're not a microcosm. Our kids are out beyond Littleton all the time, and they're dealing with different cultural groups. Our goal is to have everybody, every single individual in our district, not only respect diversity, but celebrate diversity. And I understand this is a tradition. I'm not going to say it isn't a tradition, but there are many schools out there, at least 3 years ago, have made this change. We looked at it 3-4 years ago, but we didn't feel the diversity in this community was at that point where we really needed to have those discussions. No child should ever feel disadvantaged because of something that we do and we organize within our school district. That is totally unacceptable and unfair. So our intent is to make sure everybody has a sense of belonging. And you know what? Some don't. Some do not in our school district. They are underrepresented and they do not feel that sense of belonging. So what is the solution? We continue to work together. We need to continue to move forward with cultural proficiency, and we need to continue to reach out to our community and bring them along with us so that we can move at a pace that is manageable and people understand what we're trying to do. Mrs. Temple did this with totally good intentions. It was one article, but if you research this, there are many articles out there that support these kinds of actions within school districts. I was at Russell Street today because I was really curious to see how the students reacted to the change. And, I have to tell you, I wasn't there all day, but I didn't see sad faces. I saw kids that were happy. So maybe they were disappointed at home, maybe they were disappointed on the bus. But when they came, excuse me, when they came into school, they were happy. So I think Spirit Day, the whole idea of Spirit Day is to celebrate together. Does it have to necessarily unintentionally marginalize somebody in our school population? I don't think it should. I mean, another thing that we've talked about since this has happened is there another way to brand this event? Maybe there's a solution that will be a win-win for everybody, but we need to spend some time talking about that. There are a variety of opinions in any community that you're in when you're seeking greater cultural proficiency, and there are going to be bumps along the way. That's what happens when we have to look in the mirrors and really reflect on our own belief systems. And I guess with that, I'm going to ask Mrs. Temple to talk a bit about the events that happened and the rationale behind the decision that was made.
Thank you. Just to fill in some gaps. So the third grade team took on the responsibility of planning Spirit Week this year. And I think the most unfortunate part in this event was that when we had the agenda scheduled last week, that no one, myself included, flagged this, the crazy hair day or wacky hair day for today. And so our activity list was published. When I received the email on Monday with this information, I brought the information to the third grade team and spoke to Mrs. Romano about it and assured the parent who had sent me the email that I was going to, look into this and go ahead further. When I spoke to the members of the third grade team who had worked on this, they were not familiar with this either. And we talked about how do we go forward? Do we just say our event this year is scheduled and we're going to go forward with it and we'll think about it later? What do we do? And there was a lot of conversation about that. And a lot of thinking about that. Additionally, I spoke with Beth, who is the chairperson of the DEI committee, and I also spoke to Dr. Clenchy. We, as the third grade team, our decision was, do we go forward with an event that could potentially upset or offend, whatever word you want to use, our students at our school. And for us, in our thinking, the students at Russell Street, 352 of them, are all our students. I think it was important to us that we don't sacrifice anyone, even one. And so we knew that people were going to be upset and disappointed by this. And we tried to quickly kind of pivot and decide what we could do and kind of fill in this event. But in general, and staff-wide, and I know people are out there listening from Russell Street right now, as a staff, we determined that 352 kids are important, every last one of them, to us, and we didn't want to err on the side of any single one of them. And what I said in our meeting the other day was, I've been in education for a long time, and over the years, there was things we didn't know. And as we did know about them, like special education, I've been in this so long that special education was a new thing when I was 22 years old and started teaching. Special ed was new. And when we know better, we do better. When we think about social emotional learning, wellness, mental health, all of the things that we concentrate on, these are relatively new topics. And when we learn about them and we know better, it's up to us to do better. And I will wholeheartedly say, in defense of myself and the staff at Russell Street, that I think as we knew better this time, we did better. We made a decision that was right for 352 students in this instance. As Dr. Clenchy indicated, the more time that we've had to think about this, we certainly could rebrand that event That includes hair to be something that doesn't have an adjective attached to it perhaps, and be able to do something that everyone would feel comfortable with. Certainly, it begs more conversation as we move forward. But I will stand by our decision that with the information that we had, we made a decision to do better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Steele.
If you'll recall, our last meeting, we were talking about DEI, right? And we said it was ongoing conversation, we were gonna revisit it. I don't know that we knew we were gonna revisit it as quickly as we are, but that's to be expected, right? This is life, this is what happens. And so I appreciate that we're having this conversation and open to having a conversation about this. In education, and even this evening, we frequently say that we assume good intentions. And at times, that leads to positive impact. And that's wonderful, that's what we want. However, good intentions at times can also lead to a negative impact. And when that happens, we have to reflect upon the how and the why there was a negative impact and change our practice to do and to be better. As a broader society, we are seeing this right now with the change of professional sports teams' names, the change of school and district mascots, and even a reexamination of our Massachusetts state seal. As our district mission states, we commit to evolve together as a diverse community through education, accountability, and compassion. Evolution comes from decisions, hard decisions, thoughtful decisions, and learning that happens through ourselves and others. We are striving to be culturally proficient educators and individuals. Every single day, we want our students, our staff, our families, our community members to feel safe and supported in our schools and beyond in our community. To feel safe and supported requires us to be equitable and inclusive, but it also requires us to ensure that all students have the opportunity to experience belonging for exactly who they are. This is why, at our last meeting, we briefly discussed the B, belonging, and adding that to our already established DEI team. After a discussion with our DEI team this past Tuesday afternoon, we decided to officially adopt the belonging to our DEIB team. In doing this, we publicly support practices that afford all students the feeling of not only being included, but also having that feeling of belonging. We are growing, we are adapting and learning. And just like we tell our students, mistakes happen. It is when they do happen that we have to reflect upon them and learn from them, which I would say we are experiencing and witnessing right now. Thus, we will reflect on our decisions and will continue to reflect as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Having heard a response from the district, I'd just like to, give a chance for school committee members to speak, because I'm sure perhaps, you had a number of conversations with other community members the past couple days, and you have comments you'd wish to share or a reflection that you wish to share with the community. And that would be the time. Jen?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you to everybody. Thank you. Parents that spoke, Ms. Temple, Beth Steele. I certainly agree. We don't want to leave any student or child feeling unincluded, left behind, less than in any way. And I get that. I think we all care for our students and our children very deeply. I also assume good intent. And I also really appreciate what you both said about taking some time to reflect. Maybe things were done a little too quickly. Good intent, I believe that was there. My concern personally, and what I have heard from other parents who've reached out, is the slippery slope. Maggie, you mentioned this idea of a slippery slope. My concern is that if we are to rethink and potentially cancel or take away every experience, every tradition, because preemptively and proactively, because it might offend or exclude or not fit this DEI framework, we will be left with no traditions, no fun days, no spirit weeks. That's a concern. I think we're I think we're on the precipice of that right now. So while we all may look back and laugh at how we were so up in arms about wacky hair versus hat day, this is a kind of a moment in time where we can make a choice about how we move forward and set a precedent. So that's the concern. It's the slippery slope. It's the concern that we will preemptively take away every experience because it could offend or exclude and be left with a very bleak kind of basic landscape. So that's my feeling.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing. Elaine?
Yeah, I had some thoughts too.
Sure.
Again, I really appreciate both the parents here for taking the time and coming out and expressing your thoughts so clearly. It's so much better to come in person and have a conversation than to post things on Facebook. So I'm very grateful that you came in. And thanks for sharing the photos. Very adorable photos of a girl with her wacky hair. I did have a follow-up question for you. You had mentioned the inclusivity and some of the positive attributes of Wacky Hair Day. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what of those things would not also apply to Wacky Hat Day.
Before you, I just want to be careful that we're not going to have a back and forth with the
No,
public.
this is
So
just a clarifying
that's
question.
okay. But
Yeah.
I just want to set a precedent that we're not going to
Right.
have open dialogue.
Sure. So I think the concern with changing it to Wacky Hat Day, I think was in the moment, right? So we're referring to parents who already have a slammed busy schedule as it is between sports, school, extracurricular, pets, you name it.
Job.
Forgot about that one.
That one.
Thank you.
Gets in the way sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see where my priorities are. So to have a day and a half to whip something together, I believe reactionary is very overwhelming. And while working through those emotions of something being taken away, right? A tradition being taken away. So it's not necessarily that Wacky Hat Day can't substitute it. It's more so the fact that at that moment, without a lot of notice, we're all supposed to change everything that we had planned. I don't know if you've seen this, but this is what we have, right? Given to us. This is our agenda for the week for our kids. I have 3. So our middle daughter, Ada, who you're seeing here, this was her agenda. Next week is Delaney, our oldest, is her agenda for Spirit Week.
All right, thank you. Thank you for
So
clarifying. I just wanted
you get,
to, yeah.
the sentiment there that it's just overwhelming, and it's not necessarily that it can't be done with Wacky Hat Day. It's just the circumstance. What I would say is one quick thing is there's been some discussion of changing the, Dr. Clancy, you referred to, I forget how you phrased it, but maybe just changing, rebranding,
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
What about Fun Hair Day? I mean, is fun offensive? I hope not. Those photos are fun. She's having a lot of fun, and we can still maintain the tradition.
Thank you for
Thank you.
clarifying. So it seems to me like there's a few things going on here. One is the loss of a tradition. One is the rapid turnaround, and also maybe kind of an abstract understanding of why Wacky Hair Day might be offensive. So I just want to give you my perspective on that part of it first. I very recently was a school administrator in Lowell, did a lot of school walkthroughs. came upon a couple incidents that really changed my thinking on that. One was a teacher insisting that a girl take her hood down because that's a dress code rule. And she was like this, didn't want to take it down because she was an African-American girl, didn't have time to do her hair that morning because she was in a rush and she was just like this, didn't want anybody to see her hair. And she was forced to take her hood down. And then another incident with some high school students at Lowell High, they were at a focus group complaining about why couldn't they wear head wraps, which is a common practice when for African-American girls when they don't have time. You know, it takes hours sometimes to do some of the hairstyles that they do. They wanted to be able to wear a head wrap on days they didn't have time, and it wasn't being allowed because of dress code. So that, as a white woman, that opened my eyes as to hair issues for African-American women in particular. So my concern with Wacky Hair Day is that maybe some of the wacky hairstyles that kids would come up with might be similar to what African-American girls feel like is their bad hair day, and they might feel like it was making fun of them. And it's true that, you know, students like that may not ever report feeling offended because they're already feeling marginalized and othered. So, you know, to Mrs. Temple's point, I think we don't want to run the risk of making anyone feel offended or less than. So that's why I asked about Wacky Hat Day. If for kids, like, that's not a personal thing. A hat's not part of your body. And, you know, would the third graders have just as much fun with a wacky hat, being that they are third graders, they're brand new to the Russell Street School, and they are not aware of the tradition. I think maybe part of the angst is that parents are suffering the feeling of loss of a valued tradition, but that's the parents' tradition. And, you know, as Mrs. Steele said, we know better and we want to do better and start a new tradition that doesn't have so much to do with someone's personal appearance. So that's kind of rough. But again, I really appreciate you coming in front of the school committee to express your concerns.
Thanks, Elaine. Stacey, you've been
Yeah.
comments?
Well, first I want to say thank you for coming because you've opened up this discussion, which obviously needed to happen. So had you not come and represented some of the concerns that parents had, we definitely could run the risk of kind of cancel culture. So I think this is a really great opportunity for us to open that discussion. And it seems as though everyone in administration kind of understands now and sees and can reflect and say, okay, like there's a different way for us to approach that. But I also wanted to commend you guys in administration for actually acknowledging and seeing that this was something that was a 30-year tradition that maybe we need to reevaluate, because that's showing a really big commitment to one of our big objectives in the school district as we grow, which is to be more inclusive and to be more equitable. And at some point you have to start making those decisions, that you have to start breaking some traditions or changing those traditions and evaluating how we can still incorporate those in a safe way for all of the students. So I think on both ends, we're having a really good discussion here. And it seems like everybody kind of understands that this is something that has to be talked about and something that is a good stepping stone for us to be able to go forward to make some positive progress, so that we aren't losing these really fun traditions. But like you said, like rebranding is a really great way for us to just be able to take a step back and say, how can we make sure that this is an inclusive activity that isn't calling anyone out or marginalizing anyone. And Elaine, I think you said it really well, just kind of the three kind of things. We have a loss of tradition here, kind of a reactionary quick pivot that everyone had to go through. And then it's just as a community as a whole, trying to have some grace as we're all kind of navigating this together and trying to get through these changes together. So I think, you know, that being said, I'm trying to give everyone some grace on this. I understand it's a quick pivot for the kids and for the parents, and that's something that we all have to learn together. It's a quick pivot for the administration. That's something we're going to learn from. But I think it's positive change that we're going to be able to make. And the only thing that I would say that we kind of missed on that we can work on is this was kind of like a missed teaching opportunity for the students and for families, you know, having a greater explanation as to why
it was offensive. I think that would have been really helpful for us all to have had that information a little bit more forthcoming when the change was made, so that parents could have that discussion with their kids or could learn themselves and have that discussion. So I think as we start to pivot and change some of these things, we have to really internalize that these are teaching moments, not just for our own processes here, but also for like families and students as we're all trying to kind of figure out how to grow together with a district that's changing, with a district that's being more diverse. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think this is great. And I think we'll be able to figure it out going forward. So
Thank you. There's not much to add to the conversation because I think everybody kind of contributed some significant value here. I'll say that you know, had it been Wacky Hat Day from the beginning, I don't think anyone would have thought otherwise, and we wouldn't have been having this conversation this evening. So when mistakes happen, there's an opportunity to have a meaningful conversation, and I'm glad that we're having it this evening. And you're right, I didn't think that we would be revisiting DEI as quickly as we are. To kind of expand upon your point, you know, I think this really was hindsight being 2020. It's a lot easier to go back and say, could we have done things differently, right? And where I land is, you know, could we have proceeded with a hair day, but maybe perhaps change the name to Fun Hair Day or Awesome Hair Day or something like that, and then provided more information to the parents about DEI concerns, such as we just want to bring to your attention that certain hairstyles or etc. could be racially insensitive, etc. You know, please refrain from that in the event that your child showed up to school that day. We would have to deal with those situations because when I first saw the email, I got to be honest with you, I thought of a couple reasons why maybe Wacky Hair Day was inappropriate, but the Black community wasn't the first to come to mind. And I also sympathize with this movement here where it has the pendulum swung too far, where we are so prepared to shut something down in the event that we possibly might be offending someone. You know, my thoughts immediately go to like the Shaker Lane Halloween parade. Next year, someone's going to say that's not necessarily inclusive because not everyone celebrates Halloween or can afford a costume. And all of a sudden we lose that. You know, to take the analogy even further, you know, we have Patriots Day and Red Sox Day, right? When they're in the playoffs or whatever. Well, I know a lot of Phillies fans, and you know, we don't have that day for them. So everyone's, you know, it's an exaggeration, but eventually we're going to lose everything if we try to satisfy or not include. You know, if we're going to try to include everyone, the only way to do that is to have nothing. And I think it's an opportunity to say, there is a grander world out there. You know, there's a bubble beyond Littleton. You're going to run into some challenges. People are not always going to think the way that you think. You're going to have to learn how to deal with those situations. And in that K-12 environment where you have, you know, hopefully a stable household, you've got educators that care about you. We can try to shape and mold those individuals so that when they graduate Littleton High, they're better prepared global citizens. So to cancel things and try to shelter away from that, I think probably isn't the best way to do it. I think providing the community additional education perhaps was a better way to handle the situation. That's kind of my 2 cents. So.
And if I could have a minute.
Sure.
You know, I really appreciate both of you coming out tonight. I mean, the conversation was very helpful to me as a superintendent. I was immersed in cultural proficiency probably back in 2015. And I share some of the concerns I heard this evening about cancel culture. I'm not a cancel culture fan, and I never will be. But there are certain things that we're going to have to do as we continue our mission of cultural proficiency. And I draw, I guess, a significant difference in hockey jerseys or whatever we're talking about. And when it comes to somebody's body or their hair. And I think that's a differentiation that we all need to acknowledge. As your superintendent, I have no interest in supporting a cancel culture in any way. That's not who I am. But at the same time, I'm charged with the responsibility of making sure that every child and family that goes to our schools feels supported and a sense of belonging. And it's tough at times because you never know how some people feel right away. It may be 4 years, 5 years. Child at Schcmte may not say anything to us until they're in high school. And some damage could be done, maybe not. But I mean, our children's development socially, emotionally, intellectually is very important, and self-esteem is huge in the developmental process. And we just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support every student. We don't want to offend people, but we want to have conversations like this so that we can together work out what's best as we continue to move forward, because we're not perfect. No system is perfect. We need to continue to move forward and find areas that we may be unconsciously not aware of what we're doing. I mean, I don't believe things are done intentionally within school districts. I mean, it's unintentional consequences, for lack of a better phrase. But the only way we become better is to reflect and evaluate what we're doing. And I think what we need to do somehow is try to engage our public more in the mission that we have. Even our school councils being more involved in spirit days or spirit weeks, et cetera, would be helpful and be another set of eyes on what we're doing. But I just want to make sure that everybody tonight realizes we're not doing this to be difficult. We're doing this because we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support every child in our district. So, and I hope you realize that. I mean, I've heard comments. It was a knee-jerk reaction. It was a quick reaction. I really appreciate what she said about, I have my schedule for the week, and I remember my kids when they were young, and it was hard even with the schedule. So if you switch their schedule, you panic in trying to figure it out. So that point was really well taken. Thank you for that. So, I mean, we can do better, and we'll continue to strive to do better. And our doors are always open. We love these kinds of conversations. And in a way, if we wouldn't have had this happen, we wouldn't have this opportunity to start talking about what people value in our community. So I think this has been a good start, hopefully, to further outreach. Jim?
So I think it sounds like, to me at least, that the main concern you guys are bringing up is that, like Wacky Heritage is like a tradition, and we shouldn't cancel it based on, potential for offense violence. But I also think that we have to be careful that we aren't valuing tradition over, active measures to be sensitive to other people's culture. And when it comes to what we're valuing today, it's really whether or not, parents are disappointed versus, a child in a school system that can see their culture being labeled as wacky. And I think that, the potential negative impact on that child who sees their culture as wacky, is much worse than, say, like, parents being disappointed that a tradition is being canceled. Because although tradition is important, we have to recognize that certain traditions can be offensive, and the children are happy, as Dr. Clenchey mentioned. So I don't really think there's any disappointment on that side, at least not that I've heard. And I think that if parents decide to embrace the new tradition of Wacky Hat Day, then so will the children. And I think this is a positive twist on the old tradition. And you also mentioned that, this is sort of like a slippery slope that we might just remove all, things that could potentially be offensive. But we're not really removing the traditions. We're just adopting them to be more inclusive to every child so that everyone can enjoy these traditions rather than at the expense of certain cultures. And Mr. McCarthy, you mentioned a couple examples like Halloween, but even with Halloween, there are certain limitations on what you can wear as a Halloween costume. So I don't think that keeping insensitive traditions, to say like prepare kids for the real world, is a good solution that we should build into the system.
Thank you for answering that, Jay.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't want to do this, but I meant to say one more thing. The issue with one of the points I meant to bring up was just the fact that pivoting from wacky hair to wacky hat you really could have ended up with some of the same unintentional consequences. I can think a number of hats that could have shown up. Now, they probably wouldn't have shown up because a lot of people are cognizant of wearing something that's inappropriate to school. But there are, inappropriate hats that even have some hair associated with them that very well could have just shown up in the public schools. So it was really the educational piece that I hope we, the educational piece to the community that I hope we try to accomplish next time. Like Jay was just saying, there's during a Halloween thing, there are certain costumes that are appropriate and certain ones that aren't. Therefore, when we have a fun hair day going forward or a fun hat day, we probably just need to lay out what's appropriate, what the expectations are, so that we don't have a misstep or some unintended consequences. And I apologize for piling on, but to trade one day for another day when you really could have had the same outcome, I failed to make that point. So if there aren't any other folks that wish to speak on any other topics, we'll close out this interested citizens portion of the meeting.
Yeah, I just mentioned one thing.
Sure.
You said community learning together. December 5th, we have Dr. Khalees Mornham coming to provide a community presentation on the definition of cultural proficiency and what that means and what that looks like. And so since you just mentioned it, I just want to reiterate it's a good opportunity to bring that up and invite that for everyone that is listening and hears of this to come join us for that conversation that will extend what we've been doing here today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to get back to our regularly scheduled agenda. We'll start with the recognition portion of the evenings. Jay Kang, could you give us student representative report?
I guess starting with Russell Street School. So last meeting, I brought up the cultural art fair, and last week, the Russell Street students had a wonderful cultural art activity thanks to the PTA. The students and families have also been extremely generous for this year's food drives for loaves and fishes. And we'll know tomorrow exactly how much in pounds that were donated this year, and hopefully I'll update the committee next week. Last year's fourth graders, so this year's fifth graders, completed a compassion project of creating birthday boxes for needy families, which contained all the materials needed to have a birthday party. And the boxes were completed in the spring and were just donated last week. Russell Street students and staff also look forward to the school-wide turkey trot activity on the track next week. And for Shaker Lane, the first round of parent-teacher conferences are November 29th. And they encourage all families to sign up and meet with that child's teacher. And besides that, Shaker Lane would like to wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving. And I didn't get anything for the middle school. So for the high school, the girls soccer team made it to semifinals at states, but were unfortunately knocked out in a tough game against Sun. And with that, all sports are coming to an end, with winter sports picking back up after Thanksgiving. And there are a couple other announcements to look forward to as well. So next Tuesday on November 21st is Littleton's annual Powder Puff game, and the football team will play their Thanksgiving Day football game on the 23rd. Littleton's fall play on Shakespeare's Macbeth will be showing from December 1st to December 3rd. And finally, Littleton's NHS is doing a coat drive, collecting scarves, hats, mittens at the Lowell Transitional Center, and having a meal packing events for Rise Against Hunger, and having penny wars to raise money for the Red Cross. And that's something.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jay. See, are there any other points of recognition that you wish to share with us this evening?
Sure, just the grade 2 Littletown cardboard project. I just have to say, I mean, I was so impressed with our grade 2 teachers and our students who developed their own town and decided what was important to be part of this community, and they really were excited about what they had built, and they really wanted to explain why it was an important part of the town. So just wanted to thank our staff for venturing out into that project, and also thank them for inviting us, because it was a real treat. It made my day, and the enthusiasm was really incredible. So thanks to the grade 2 staff for doing that, and of course Heidi McGregor, who spends a lot of time working with teachers in K through 5.
That was fun. Elena and I had a chance to be there as well. It's a little chilly, but it was a fun event. All right, moving right along to our first new business, first and only new business agenda item is superintendent's report. So I'll just touch on these and then turn it over. So Superintendent Kelly Clinch will discuss the DEIAB schematic, playbook initiative, Care Solace map testing and the Littleton District Review. It says you only have 10 minutes for this, but we'll see how you do.
I'll talk fast.
I'm just kidding. Take whatever time you need. We're way behind schedule, so take whatever time you need.
I may say some wrong words, but that's okay. So I came across this schematic and you know, we talk a lot about DEI and we've added B and I've added A in the schematic. So it keeps growing, the acronym. But I thought this analogy was really great. And when I saw it, I mean, being Steve and I, the only males on staff in central office, we're not into shoes as much as the rest of our staff are. And we kind of don't know how to handle these conversations because we don't have a gazillion shoes that we bought. But so it made a lot of sense to me that when I saw this to use this as an example. So equity is everyone getting a pair of shoes. Diversity is everyone getting a different type of shoe. Equity is everyone getting a pair of shoes that fits. Acceptance is understanding we all wear different kinds of shoes. And belonging, which we've added to DEI, is wearing the shoes you want without fear of judgment. So I really like the way this was organized. It's simple, it makes sense, and it's a great reference for us to use. And I'm not suggesting that we have to add acceptance to our DEIB, but you want to have that discussion, that's fine as well. We're always going to find variations in diversity, equity, inclusion.
I say I love how the Crocs, the belonging picture.
You're not going to slap that to me.
That right there, all stuff Crocs.
I have to
All of us
confess
are
that
people are
I
offended.
guess I did it.
My son is furious.
So
They are comfortable.
they are, right? They really are. So I'm really excited about the next item on my report, the playbook initiative. And I sent you a letter, and I know you've all read it, but it really, what this is going to do is for us is have a student voice that's committed to DEI in our district. And rather than me talk about it, we found a 5-minute video clip that does an excellent job. And I'm really impressed that the Boston Celtics are sponsoring this initiative as well. And it's really nice when you have a professional athletic team sponsor something that's so important. So Steve, I'm hoping it works. If not,
Yeah, me too. Give me a second.
Anytime you can be engaged in thought about leadership, about inclusion, about diversity, about conflict resolution, it's a positive. We've spent a lot of time talking about it as a team, especially last year in the preseason, about how we could utilize this platform of being a part of a professional sports team in the Boston Celtics to help initiate discussions with younger kids in the communities to help do our part. And so from my own standpoint, it was about trying to work with Dave and work with our team to figure out how best to attack that.
The idea behind the playbook, essentially borrowing the concept of how a playbook is used for in sport. Coaches devise a strategy, coaches devise a playbook, they give it to the players, they practice it on the court, they study it, they live it, they sleep it, they breathe it, all with the purpose of being able to execute when the game situation comes. The hypothesis is that you can take that playbook scenario from the court and how it's used in traditional sports and apply it very effectively to social situations. In this case, confronting discrimination and bias. It was an icebreaker to get them comfortable with each other, taking kids from 3.5 miles apart but vastly different worlds, to bring those groups together to have this type of dialogue. First workshop, we had a couple of our players and a coach to introduce the concepts, kind of model what a scenario is and how it can be used in a playbook type setting.
When I was a kid growing up, I really looked up to the players. And, you know, I think I have a good idea of how kids view them and what their impact can be when they walk into a school setting, in an auditorium, and talk about, you know, these areas that we're talking about.
No one wants to feel excluded because of, you know, the color of their skin or, you know, the way they look, anything like that. So, you know, I understand what a lot of people are going through, and being on the Celtics give me a platform to be able to use my voice.
Second workshop, we brought together the same group of kids and told them that they were going to be discussing one of 5 different topic areas: race, culture, religion, disability, gender, and sexual orientation. Ultimately coming away with an assignment: write a scenario that you think is realistic, could be potentially a good teaching tool and a catalyst for dialogue, and do it from the bystander's perspective, and then submit them anonymously to us. And at the 3rd workshop, we got the group back together and we had them edit, modify, tweak other students' scenarios, creating discussion questions to kind of facilitate a dialogue around them. Most importantly, coming up with intervention options for those scenarios. The 4th workshop was the unveiling of the playbook that these students created, and getting a chance to actually see in real time how they can be used as this teaching tool.
The things that these kids are learning and being able to apply it to, real life scenarios, I think that's the key. I think that's the one thing that kids always are without, the application part. They learn a bunch of different things in school, but they don't know how to apply it or how it relates to the world. In actuality, it all relates. So I think what we're doing here today in the playbook is making real life scenarios and taking what kids already know and then just applying it. Education is the key and application is the ignition. So to continue to move forward, to start the car, to continue to move forward, application is definitely necessary.
Growing up, I wish I had something like that where someone would literally give me step-by-step instructions on how to handle certain situations, whether you're getting bullied or picked on by some other kids or a problem going on outside of school. I would have benefited greatly from that.
One thing that I learned from the playbook was you should treat other people the way you want to be treated. We should know about this stuff and it shouldn't be hidden, because since we're getting older, we're gonna have to find it out one way, and this is a good way to figure it out.
I think it was more like getting out of your comfort zone too. I feel like that was like the big part of it, and being more open to people and sharing your thoughts.
I learned from the playbook, you have to keep control of yourself and the things that are around you so you can make good choices. I mean, it's common to make mistakes and it's human, but if you prevent those mistakes from happening, you could become a better person and make the people around you better too.
I think that there's a lot that you take with you in settings like that. And it's not just the kids. Like when we're sitting in there and having those discussions and I listen to Al Horford talk, then I take something with me at 41 years old that I'll keep with me forever. And so it's pretty special.
The kids are our future, Those are the ones that's going to be our doctors and our CEOs and everything growing up. So that's how you start this change in progress and this change that we're looking for. It's going to start with those guys. So to see those kids taking a big interest in it made me happy.
Ultimately, what you hope is that each student takes something away from it that helps them become a better teammate, better family member, better leader in their schools, in their communities, more conscious of conversations going on around them and how they can make everybody a little bit better around them.
I've seen it now through multiple workshops work. The kids are having the conversation, they're more and more comfortable having the conversation and the dialogue, and they're walking away with actual intervention methods that they feel comfortable with, which is incredibly powerful.
And I'd like to thank Ms. Snow for, Ms. Snow is our equity coordinator for the district, and she's going to be working with this group as well. So excited to have the kickoff in December, and once they get going, we'll invite them to the school committee to give us an update in terms of what they're doing.
Just a quick question. How many students are involved with the?
So the team is comprised of a lead trainer and a deputy trainer. So there's 2 high school students, and then there's a lead educator, which is a staff person, and then an administrator. But this is driven by the students. So our role is really just to help facilitate, like get them a space organized, and then 30 middle school students will be selected to be trained by the high school students, like through a series of workshops. Really exciting opportunity. 28 districts across the Commonwealth were selected. We're lucky that we'll be one of those 28.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Exciting. So next on my report is Care Solace. It's something we haven't talked about for a while, but I wanted to include one of the reports that we get every month from Care Solace. we do get more information, but I can't present that because it digs down into specifics and could lead to identification. But when you see from the report that I've included in our package, there's a lot of information that we get about our community, school community members that require further support. So I do feel that the service that we invested in around 3 years ago has more than paid for itself. And when you go down, it goes right back from July. It starts at the beginning of our new year, or central office anyway. And you can see the number of cases, the number of appointments, communications, and they also have a chart in terms of the total number of minutes that have been spent on people that have needs that need to be met. Then if you keep scrolling down, communication by time of day is kind of interesting. It starts around 7 a.m. and it tapers off about 8 p.m. at night. Pretty consistent from month to month. And then if you go to the next bar graphs, you have some demographics about gender, females. We have 65% of individuals in our community that have contacted this service, and males 35%. And then by age, we have adolescents 12 to 17, 48% of that group or age span has been contacted Care Solace since July. And children 3 to 11, 30%. And adults 18 to 64, 22%. Interesting demographics. Ethnicity, Caucasian, 74%. Hispanic, Latino, 17%. Asian Pacific, 9%. And then when you go down to the bar graph in terms of the concerns that individuals have, you can see that anxiety is leading the way. And it has been for a while. I mean, it's not as if these different challenges are having a different placement on this bar graph throughout time. Anxiety remains to be the highest challenge that individuals or people are having in our school community. Followed by trauma, ADHD, depression, disruptive, suicidal ideation, marital, OCD, EDM, autism. Very good information to have, and what's even more powerful is we're making a difference in having people that need help get the services that they need to heal. And we talked about our community health centers. We brought some information about that a couple of meetings ago, and having access to community health centers close by that at times 24/7 access for people that are in distress has made a huge difference as well. So I feel as a state, as a community, we're not only making concerted efforts to help people, but we're making a difference, which is really important. And just the bottom part, which you're probably not really interested in, they also give us the providers that people are using to access services. So just wanted to present that to you this evening so you had a better understanding of what kinds of things Care Solace provides to our school community.
I just have one thing.
Sure.
We had our clinical team meet last month, and our representative from Care Solace came to give us an update, and they're adding to their array of services is helping connect families with autism with ABA services, or families who have children with autism, which is a new service that they're providing. But Massachusetts is a state that has insurance funded ABA services, so they'll be helping families make connections to those services as well.
That's great. Thank you. Map testing, just wanted you to know that our first testing session is over, and we test 3 times a year, so we're going to have some good information as we do every year in terms of our map testing. And the last item I have, Littleton District Review. They finished today. They were in our district all week, and it was nice to have some guests in our district, and we're very anxious and interested to see what kind of findings they come up with, the targeted district review. So we probably won't be seeing anything for five months or so. So it was nice to have an opportunity to talk to them and also utilize a research process that will give us a product that will be helpful to us as well.
Great. Did you also want to touch on the conference that you?
Yes, and off script, off my report, Elaine and I had an opportunity to attend the MASC conference that happens annually every year in November. I was only able to come down for a night and a day, but Elaine was able to be down there, I believe, for most of the conference, if not all of the conference. And it's a real powerful event. I mean, there's not many opportunities where you can go to an event and learn together as a superintendent and a school committee member, and also meet school committee members from all over the state. So I find it really, really powerful. And I've been going for my 13th one, and I never say to myself that I don't need to go, because there's always something to learn from year to year. So with that, Elaine's going to give us more correctly a kind of a short review of some of the highlights of the conference, so that if there's something that you're interested in, we can certainly have Elaine speak at another school committee meeting, and we'll allocate more time.
Okay, great. Yeah, it was very powerful because the sessions were all presented by teams of superintendents and school committee members. So it was very relevant to our work, and it was, I think so often when we're facing some challenge, we'd like to reach out to other districts to see how they've addressed that same challenge. But this was an opportunity to hear from school districts that had successfully tackled a variety of things. And the theme of the conference was investing in equitable school districts, moving from theory to practice. So perfectly timed for the beginning of our work with DEI. And I think I really hit the nail on the head with picking my sessions. This is sort of an art form to try to wend your way through a conference agenda and try to get the best ones. And I really, I feel good about that. There was, so I'm only going to speak briefly about the sessions I went to about DEI, because that's kind of what's relevant and pertinent right now. DESE had a session where they were just highlighting a lot of the resources that they offer. They actually have DEI as part of their educational vision more broadly. And I just wanted, they're also focusing on belonging, as we've been talking about. So I just wanted to read a couple sentences from their website about belonging, because it really resonated with me. Belonging is when all students are known and valued. Students and families have a sense of belonging, that they are known, respected, and valued for who they are and what they bring to the school community. And students engage in learning that values and builds on their background knowledge, lived experiences, and cultural and linguistic assets. So I thought that frames very nicely, a belonging goal. So there's tons of resources on DESE's website. Another powerful session I went to was from the Needham School Committee and their superintendent, who had taken what I thought was a pretty unique approach to DEI, which was, instead of hiring a DEI coordinator, they came up with this shared leadership model. So it was the superintendent, and they had 4 assistant superintendents and a school committee member were all on this committee that they called the Real Coalition. So it's race, equity, access, and leadership. But what impressed me about that was that it wasn't just like a team of people kind of working on the same thing and, as one body. It was that each person was implementing DEI in their own responsibilities in the district. And it really impressed me, the cohesiveness that it formed in the group. Like, you could just sense the shared mission and the cohesion of the group. It kind of emanating off of them. It was really impressive. So I took that away from that one. Chelmsford, our neighbor to the north, they had a session because they've been identified as being very successful with DEI. Their big takeaway was that the school committee needs to have a DEI mission statement that they believe in and that becomes part of the school culture, and that school committee members need to be trained on DEI, because if school committee members haven't done the work themselves, they don't have the confidence to respond to community concerns. So that kind of hit me. And then so many of the sessions were, elevator level, big picture, mission kinds of sessions that I think are typical in conferences. And I kept thinking, I wish I could just get some meat on the bone. Like, how do you do this? And then I walked into the meat on the bone session, which was great. So that was from Pittsfield. And they shared their slideshow, which I've already shared with Beth and Lynn, which was their actual process, step by step. It was the kinds of slides that you should never present because they were so full of text. Terrible for a presentation, but great if you can look at them afterwards, and full of live links to their whole process. And so I did meet with the DEI team. I'm on the DEI team. So we had our meeting a couple days ago. So I had an opportunity to already talk with Beth and Lynn about how what I learned in these sessions lines up with what's already happening in Littleton. And, I want to give Lynn and Beth giant kudos for what you're doing. You both have such very busy jobs with overwhelming responsibilities, and yet you take this on and have done so much already. So a lot of the best practices that I was learning about in the conference are things that Littleton is already doing. So, the shared leadership model, if we consider that we've already got, Lynn and Beth sharing the leadership on that, but I would love to see, more involvement, from the school committee, to be part of this team, to be part of the work, to get trained so that we're able to contribute effectively. Many districts talked about doing an equity audit, that it's great to be able to partner with an organization to do that, because it's hard to audit yourself, especially when it's sensitive topics. And so Beth and Lynn explained to me that the district's already done that with Panorama and AdaptiveX, that we've already had some trainers come in to work with the teachers like Khalees Warnham and Ken Williams and Nicole Christian Rothwaite. And similar to Pittsfield, this year they're sort of taking a pause to look at all the data, look at what's happened so far, be reflective on next steps. So what I would love to see, I looked at the website, our DEI website that's on our district website, which is great. And I noticed on that website, on our mission, we have the second sentence that deals with DEI, but that sentence is not on the homepage of the district website. So whoever's the webmaster, is that you, Steve? I'm not. It might be a quick thing.
Yeah, we can take care of that.
Just make sure so that anybody who clicks on littletonps.org sees that second sentence about DEI as part of our mission. I'd love to explore the interest among school committee members for some training, and so that we can participate in more of a shared leadership model and provide some support for Beth and Lynn. And also, I think it was Needham that talked about, they made DEI part of the Portrait of a Graduate initiative. So I was poking around on the high school website and couldn't find that, but I didn't know if that was already something that we would consider, but something to think about. So anyway, I have a lot more on all of that, but I wanted to do a brief summary. Also went to presentations on curriculum because that's my jam, but sorry. So there was one on early literacy. Desi has come down very strongly on one side of the balanced literacy versus structured literacy debate. So There's no waffling there. So that was good to know. Also went to the session on investigating history, which is Desi's new social studies program. Also went to a session on MSBA, so I already forwarded that slideshow to Stacy and Justin and Kelly and Stephen, I think. And also one on generative AI, which pretty much just blew my mind, but is not relevant to anything here. So I won't go into that. So anyway, thank you to the taxpayers for sending me. I think I made it worth the money by going to every single thing.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for going.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And to the school committee, I mean, we try and work correctly. We fully understand that you guys have jobs. Excuse me, jobs and children and other responsibilities. So it's really hard for you to go to one of these things. And we're just lucky that we have you devoting the time that you are. So I don't want you to feel any pressure that you need to go to these events, because it doesn't work for a lot of people unless they're able to build in that time. And usually that means semi-retired or owning their own business or whatever. So just wanted to make sure that this wasn't a pressure message or anything. I just have a real quick thing just to shout out to our Tri-District PD Day that we held on November 7th. We had 150 special ed teachers and clinical staff at Littleton High School to learn about the new IEP that's going to be implemented next year. And then we had 225 educators at Harvard, and we're with Air Shirley as well. And we focused on solving problems and practice protocols. In the afternoon, we had 19 individual sessions offered by educators from all three districts. So very powerful day, very exciting, and special thanks to Beth and Natalie and Julie, who were part of the team that organizes this day. There's a lot of time that goes into making this day happen. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Running almost an hour behind schedule, so thank you.
Don't worry, I will not go.
Thank you. What time is it? This is an important topic. So what we're going to hear next is an update on safety and security. School resource officer Wazinski will give an overview of the school safety and training procedures. So thank you for being with us this evening, and
Thank you.
we apologize for running behind, but
I had nothing better to do, so.
I'm sure that's not true.
So I'll just start off with a brief overview of our safety protocols and procedures, and that's Dallas. Dallas training is the active shooter response program that we abide by in our school system. So that stands for alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate in no particular order. It tailors its approach to different grade levels to ensure age-appropriate understanding and preparedness. So I'll just touch upon what that means at each level. So in the elementary school, the alert, we teach the children how to recognize danger and the importance of reporting suspicious behavior. Lockdown, we practice drills focusing on securing classrooms and staying quiet. Inform, we are educating the kids on how and when to communicate with teachers and authorities during emergencies. Counter, we teach them to avoid direct confrontation, but teaches basic strategies like barricading doors or creating distractions. And evacuate is just guidance on safe evacuation routes and the importance of following instructions. In the middle school, we start to ramp it up a little bit. Alert is, we encourage students to be aware of their surroundings and report concerns to authorities. Lockdown is a more advanced lockdown procedures and understanding different scenarios. Inform, we work on education on communication protocols and providing information to authorities without jeopardizing safety. Counter, we expand on strategies, including potential responses if confronted. Evacuate, we emphasis on the decisive and safe evacuation plans tailored to their school's layout. By the time they get to high school, alert, we encourage vigilance and understandings of the importance of reporting threats or concerns. Lockdown is advanced lockdown procedures, situational awareness, and swift decision-making during crisis. Inform is clear communication protocols and understanding how to effectively convey crucial information to authorities. Counter, learning various strategies for countering an active threat, such as evacuation or self-defense if necessary. And evacuate, planning and practicing evacuation routes with an emphasis on quick and safe evacuation. Again, each level emphasizes age-appropriate strategies, gradually building upon fundamental concepts to prepare students for potential emergencies while considering their
developmental stages and abilities. And so we do this, so you guys are all familiar, we do one drill in the fall and one in the spring. And at this point, we are all up to speed. All the schools have completed those drills. So I have a few other things in addition to that. I know that that was kind of the basis of what we wanted to talk about tonight. A big thank you to, I know that they're not here and they're probably not watching, but Eric Bentley and Mr. Peter. They finally got around to fixing the issue that we've had at Shaker Lane. I know it's been long overdue. But just so you guys are aware, they were able to put a bolt mechanism in both of those doors to fix the issue that we've had. And we got the blessing from the fire department, so they are up to code as far as fire code is concerned.
Great.
Lastly, I was asked to just touch briefly upon the trainings that I've gone to that might be relevant to my role as SRO. Last month, I attended the school attendance summit, that discussed new challenges and opportunities that the schools and staff are faced with in regards to attendance issues. I recently just got my yearly SRO recertification, which was a 2-day training that included new juvenile law updates and procedures. I'm currently on a wait list to get into a training called SRO Response and Law Enforcement to critical incidents and crisis situations, which would be great as we saw an uptick in swatting calls last year in nearby towns. So it would be very beneficial to hear how other agencies may have handled these situations and what went well, what didn't. At the start of the new year, I am registering for a 5-part class called Using Your Magnifying Glass to Embrace and Discover Strategies to Engage Students. And that's broken down into classes. First one being the quiet student, second being the active student, then the school avoidance, creating an environment of belonging, and family guardian engagement. So although those trainings are directed towards teachers, I think that there will be an important aspect for an SRO to understand, to be able to connect with these students on a different level. So I'm looking forward to what those presentations have to offer. That's it.
Anybody have any questions, comments from the committee? Stacey?
Yeah, right. While you're here, not to make our meeting even longer, but I did want to touch base with you as to, we've talked a few times when you come to talk to us about kind of the time that you're delegating to all of the different schools. So I just wanted to touch base with you and figure out what time you're spending at all the schools, if you're feeling like you're spread too thin, or what it is that you would need from our school.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's enough time in the day, unfortunately, to get to every school as much as I would like. I do spend most of my time at the high school. Now that I have the Comfort Dog program, it gives me an opportunity to go to the younger grade levels and do different things with that. Fortunately, my chief has given us the ability to put on an assistant SRO, which is not a full-time position, but it does give me the flexibility and ability to lean on him if I feel like I am being spread too thin. So on his the days where he works 7 to 3, and he works 4 days on, 2 days off. So days where he's available during the week, he's actually been popping in and checking in on schools when I don't have the ability to, or don't have the time to do that. Or if I'm in training or away just out on for personal reasons, he's been filling in and checking in on those schools while I haven't been available to do so. So
It's been helpful.
it's been very helpful. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's good to know that he's going to the different schools. So I think that another question that I had for you, we have a lot of construction obviously going on around town. I just want to know what you guys have in place for navigating through all of the different detours and stuff and making sure that we're staying on top of the best.
So from my understanding, that should be done. Construction should be done for the winter. I think next week.
Okay.
So
and then
hopefully that will not be an issue. And I'm hoping that come springtime, a lot of the issues that we had at the beginning of the year will be readdressed and we should not have any issues going forward. I know that the first month or so we had an issue probably every day. And
right.
It's definitely tough to navigate, and I appreciate everybody else all the staff and the administration who tried to make it go as smoothly as possible. It was definitely hard, but they got through it.
Yeah.
But hopefully at least for the next 5 months, during the colder months, we won't.
I think the only thing this might be a you thing is the kind of the secondary locks on the doors that we have talked about sometimes during our security meetings. So this kind of a fire hazard, but we're trying to figure out whether or not it's something to pursue. I just don't know if there's any update on that. That would be worthy of kind of talking about.
We're still working, I think, with the fire department to find the appropriate door lockdown mechanism that meets fire code. That there's lots of issues still with some of the devices that are on the market that don't really meet the fire code. So we don't have a solution on that yet, but we're still looking for ideas and information.
To clarify, the doors do have locks.
Yes, all the doors, every door is,
everyone knows, yeah.
every classroom door is locked.
Yeah.
In every school, and in an event, in an emergency, all they have to do is remove the magnet that covers the latch and the door closes and it's now locked from the outside.
Yeah.
These are secondary locks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for going to all those trainings. It sounds like a lot, but it's so important to stay.
Yeah, I'm definitely fortunate that I have the ability to do that, and my chief is very willing to send me, so
That's great.
Did you always plan to, step into this role or?
that was always the goal since
Perfect.
day one, so. here we
That's
are.
great. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
everything you do.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Justin,
Yes.
we're getting on in time. Do we want to look at the agenda and make some adjustments if you feel necessary? I see some nods.
Yeah.
I can't say that. There's some big.
So I'm feeling that there might be a movement here to maybe skip the update on the crisis go and just get right into the MCAS update. Is that what we want to do?
We could,
Or do we want to table MCAS and move that to the next meeting?
well, it's up to you as a group.
I don't want to make people who came to talk about MCAS have to
Yeah.
come back after waiting.
Why don't we start MCAS and if, we feel as a group that we're tapped out, in terms of, we've been here for 2 hours and if we don't feel that we're able to, to keep going on, then we should table the rest of the agenda. I want to be respectful of your time as well.
Sure. It's like the days of old, these late meetings. I mean, we're gonna review BE, which means we can go until 10:30 without a motion. But that's fine. If it's the pleasure of the rest of the committee, why don't we just move on to the MCAS updates? So we'll go right there and we'll see where we land after this.
All right, so we will dive into MCAS. So tonight's presentation is formatted similarly to last year's for those of you that were with us last year, or if you saw last year's presentation. So we will see this evening, Steve, on the next slide, please. The outline of tonight. So we'll share some pertinent information with regards to the MCAS of 2023. And then we're going to dive right in with the results. We'll start with the high school, we'll go to the middle school, and then we will go to Russell Street. We always like to remember that whenever we're talking about a data point, it is a data point in a very larger picture of what our students are able and capable of doing. And that one data point does not represent them as an individual. This year, DESE, you might remember last year, we partnered with Open Architects because DESE was able to have that partnership created. That was the first year that they did that, and they maintained that partnership. And I appreciate Open Architects just being very forward in saying that they will always offer this for free because they see the educational benefit to districts, which I very much appreciate when it comes to, because there's a lot going on for districts. So tonight's presentation, when we dive into the schools, you will see that really we followed the protocol of what, so what, now what. And so the what is the data. So we're going to provide you with that data and what the results were. The so what are our impressions. What do we see in that data? What sticks out to us? What leaves an impression for us based on that data? And then the now what you'll see in our next steps. So we sequenced it that way to hopefully have a clear, streamlined understanding of the MCAS information. So with pertinent information, the next slide, please, Steve. Thank you. Just important to remember that the past few years, we've had very varied administrations of MCAS. And so last year, 2023, was the second traditional or typical what we have historically seen for MCAS. We had full tests in grades 3 through 8, as well as in the high school. In 2022, we had the same experience. And before that, we all know we lived varied experiences with MCAS. What I want to stress and just emphasize is that, as Desi stated last year, 2022 was the new baseline. And so that is what we go from, is the year of 2022. We can start really doing some comparisons in that work. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it right off to Dr. Harrington for high school.
Hey, everyone.
Good evening.
Jump right into it. So we're going to start off with an overview. We see a visual view on the right with a chart. All the presentation slides are similar to last year. You can see a sort of a line format across the schools. I'll start with the achievement, or students proficient, meeting expectations and exceeding expectations. In grade 10 ELA, it was 78% of the students. Average SGP was moderate or typical. It's described now about 48.4. So we're pleased with that. We'd like to be at least in the high moderate to high level of SGP. Meeting expectations, I've already mentioned. It's worth acknowledging, and I'm going to be forthright about this, that compared to last year, it is a different cohort, but that number of students meeting expectations is less than last year. And our SGP, we have started this in recent presentations a few years ago, including SGP data and achievement score, the achievement category specifically for students with disabilities. On the DESE website, it only includes students with disabilities who have IEPs. We have elaborated that with the Open Architect software that Beth mentioned to include 504s for those students with disabilities as well. So SGP for students with ELA on the ELA test was typical moderate, and meeting expectation was 44%. I think the key thing for me to point out, and I want to do this as we go through the slides, is that if you look at that, it's 22% students partially meeting expectations. Not where we want to be. You can see the gray area, sort of an incline, a slight incline. It's not exactly like that, a diagonal, but it's not exactly where we want to be if we compare ourselves with other schools that are like us in terms of typical past achievement. So we're going to make a concerted effort. You'll hear about this in the next steps to try to get more students in the meeting or exceeding expectations category. Go to the next slide, please. Grade 10 math. We're very excited about. We're happy to report the high growth, 65%. That's exceptional and compliment to the math teachers at the high school and their hard work. So 73% of the students meeting or exceeding expectations. Again, it's worth acknowledging that that's not exactly where we want to be, with 27% of the students partially meeting expectations. The SGP is certainly sort of something that it provides a little bit of solace with this, but we'd like to see that gray area. You can see it again on the graph on the right, partially meeting expectations in 2019. You see what I see. It's growing, and we need to correct that. And that we've had already two data meetings, or two department meetings with the math department dedicated to this, to review the data and start coming up with action plans and really trying to understand exactly where students have yet to take MCAS, with whether it's ELA math. What were their past performances on, even going back to middle school history, who's not doing well in math? And we just had our term 1 grades posted just yesterday. So we didn't do who's not doing as well as we'd like, who's struggling, what type of math interventions can we enact? I'm actually like to give a acknowledgement to Ray Streeter, who's a veteran volunteer tutor. He's back in action, and he's back at the high school offering tutoring for free all day for 2 days a week. So students can see him. So hopefully that will help. SGP for IEPs, 504s, typical moderate 52. That's about, last year, it's up from, meeting exceeding expectations, 45% for students with disabilities, up 5 percentage points and 3% higher than the state. And it's worth noting, though, although we're sort of, I'm sort of saying, oh, it's not where we want to be in Littleton, 73% of students meeting or exceeding expectations is 31% greater than the state. So I just want to acknowledge that. Next slide, please. We have maybe a couple of students take the chemistry test, but if we focus on grade 9 biology, sometimes students move in and they come in as sophomores and they're in the chemistry class. But grade 9 biology is our primary area of science, technology, and engineering. They do not record or report SGP for this at the high school level. Meeting or exceeding expectations, we had 76%. That's 29% above the state. So compliments to the biology teachers at the high school. Compared to last year, slightly down, but it's still a strong score overall. Meeting and exceeding expectations, the faculty, special education department, as well as the biology teachers deserve special praise for this. 61% meeting or exceeding expectations is excellent. Compared to last year, it's up 18% and 14% above the state. Again, to look at the gray area compared to last year on the chart on the right, students partially meeting expectations went up a bit. We're acknowledging that we have some work to do there. So go to the next slide, please. Overall, these slides are a little bit more spaced, but you look on the left, strengths, all students passed math and ELA MCAS. So that's not always true every year, even at Littleton High School. So we're very happy to announce that. Students continue to perform better than the state average on all MCAS tests, and the departments, after their data review meetings, reported to me that we were better than the state average on all, not only on all MCAS tests, but within every category question. So that was good to report. I already announced the SGP for ELA and math. Challenges, not to be overly repetitive, but 28% scoring partially meeting expectations in math, 22% scoring partially meeting expectations in ELA is a challenge. We have work to do with developing skills, improving achievement levels, and specifically increasing the proportion of students. It's very clear what we need to do in terms of assisting the students. And we'll continue, as we always do, in the early intervention in 9th and 10th grade to assist attendance and provide academic support. Next slide, please. A little more dense here, so this is more for the record and for your review. If you had a chance to review this in the packet, but I'll highlight a few of them. Continue to provide structures and routines that help support student academic behavioral expectations, and we always make instructional adjustments as needed. The ELA teachers wanted to highlight a couple of things they're specifically working on. They're frequently setting the prompts, rubrics, and student work to make adjustments. They did this last year. They're doing it again with even maybe a higher level of scrutiny this year. ELA teachers are emphasizing that essay need to directly address the essay question, and then there's a list of specifics that I won't read to you. And then the math teachers are providing students with more opportunities to review and practice MCAS problems. And then the rest is just something for you to review. Next slide, please. Again, a rather dense slide, not exactly, we wanted to show that we have a comprehensive plan to be responsive and address the learning needs of students, but I'll highlight a few. This is mostly for you, just review and consideration. Note and prepare for the change in the passing scores. The cut scores are going to change again in class of 2026, and then they change. They're expected to change in 2030. I think it was in August of 2022, the Board of Education voted to approve a change in cut scores and passing scores for MCAS. So it's a little bit harder to reach that meeting expectations level. And we're going to take a deeper dive into that and see how that kind of impacted us too in terms of more student scoring. It would be expected that if you increase the level of the score to meet expectations, that the first few years as we're figuring things out, there'll be more kids in the partially meeting expectations category. But it's not a category where we want most of our students staying in. We'll conduct a thorough analysis, test item analysis to identify areas where students had difficulty. Both Keith and I will be working with teachers to review consistent content coverage, as well as the department coordinators, instructional pacing, and we meet with departments each quarter to ensure that into MCAS preparation. Those discussions are already underway. And I would probably highlight one more: utilize more formative assessment tools to identify areas of concern and strength, not just waiting until like a mid-year or middle of the year, mid-semester, test or mid-year exam, and certainly not waiting until a final exam to see how the kids are doing, but really constantly using formative assessment to see how we need to adjust and reteach and reassess students. I think that moved pretty quick. So I think that sums it up for the high school. I don't know if you want to have questions now or wait till the end.
Probably best to take the questions
As we're up here.
as you're up presenting so that we don't lose our thoughts.
Hope I didn't move too fast, but I know you have to.
We had a chance to review it ahead of time, so that was the right speed. Perfect.
Can I just make a comment?
You should make it.
If anybody needs help with MCAS, or for the high school level at least, NHS has a tutoring committee.
Yes.
And they should reach out to Spencer Cowett or Anon Mehta, or the two students running that committee.
That's excellent. And we'll spread the word on that. And just this past week, we'll be hearing more about this later in the year. We have a new specific science honor society in addition to NHS. It's science specific. And Dr. Finity was telling me that those students are willing to tutor students specifically in the science subjects, regardless of whether it's MCAS or not. So that was kind of great news. So thank you for sharing that to remind me of that.
The only question or comment I had to maybe highlight was, so for the kids in 10th grade, they took half tests in 2021. Is that correct? Because that was 2021 when 3 through 8 was taking a half test. I'm just trying to understand what their
Was that being referencing the hybrid year or whatever?
In 2021 was a full test for high school, but if they were in grades 3 through 8, it was a half test.
So it was a half test for them. So this is their first first time going through the full MCAS.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify and highlight that's pretty impactful for the number.
It was a significant.
Good job with that.
Thanks for helping us out. And some of their experience with test taking might have contributed to this, but also, there was, I think the middle school, Jason had recently acknowledged that she's never heard it. The school principal was saying something about how it was, Matt, you might be able to comment on this. It was a year where there's really just, there was a fair amount of changes in the math, with the math teacher, maybe 2 or 3 teachers. And I don't know if it was that junior class that experienced that. I could confirm. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for doing the item analysis. I think that's so important because to me, that's like one of the best parts about MCAS data is that it tells you about your curriculum and instruction. And those are big ways that you can make changes. Like if you can drill down to like what types of questions are students struggling with, and is that also a weakness in our curriculum? And then you can make those changes across, multiple subject areas.
And from your experience, sometimes it is a pacing thing. The teachers didn't prioritize something that was on the test. They waited till after the test, and now we know to move that up.
Yeah. But it's like a move you can make that affects everybody.
Yes.
So it's, so I'm really glad that you highlighted that as a next step.
Yeah, it's, thank you for the presentation. I like the graphics. It makes it somewhat easy to understand the information. It's like a double-edged sword here. Like we're exceptionally exceeding state average, right? But it's kind of the expectation.
It is. It has been for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do recognize that in some of these areas, sort of the trend analysis seems to be going in the wrong way with a growing, partially meeting.
Yes.
At least we're eliminating the majority of not meeting. I'm just curious, like the sort of the doubling down on the next steps. I mean, I think that's probably the valuable piece of the presentation is, hey, look, these are the results. This is the action plan. I can appreciate that. I'm just wondering if this is the same action plan that we had last year, because if that's the case, the fruits didn't really pay off because the trend continued to go the wrong way.
And particularly related to the ELA department, some of those things I highlighted it is sort of a doubling down to go back, and maybe it was with the follow through in some of these things too, making sure. So that's why on the earlier next step slides where I talked about having Keith and I go in and meet with the teachers for consistent content coverage, looking at the item analysis ourselves, looking at the instructional pacing and checking in on that not, certainly quarterly with the departments to make sure that MCAS preparation is embedded throughout the year. That's one of our themes and has been a long time. We don't wait till the spring or 2 weeks or March, before the test and say, and cram for 2 weeks and say, oh, give them sample MCAS questions. We talk about that all the time, but I want to make sure that that's happening now in the fall, winter, so that, they don't have to tell them that's MCAS item, but you can just practice it.
Sure.
And show them one a week or whatever it is. Teachers are doing that at all the buildings, I believe. But that's something we think that will really benefit and help us to reverse that that trend that you pointed out and we certainly identified.
I'll also just say, I mean, if Brad was still on the committee, he certainly would have already made the comment that the MCAS is one test, right? And it's, a well-rounded student. This is just one piece of it, but the committee feels that this is an important piece of it, of course. So that's why we pay particular attention to it. But we realize that this isn't the end all be all of what's happening in the public schools here. So
And I think,
shout out to Brad if he's listening.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that because we do look at a lot of other different measurements. But it is definitely an indicator for us, the areas where we need to pay attention.
I did see a hand in the room. Would you mind taking a question from Maggie?
Hi,
Hi, Meg.
I'm a parent of a middle school and I'm sorry, the question's not for you.
Oh,
Well, excuse.
yes, you're excused.
But nice,
Yeah, thanks.
say hello. It's actually for the gentleman.
For Jay?
Yeah, thank
Jay.
you. I didn't know. The tutoring committee that you
Yes.
mentioned, is that available to middle school students or is it only available for high school students?
I can ask because I'm not actually sure. Because there are outreach programs towards the middle school that NHF typically does.
Okay.
So I'll ask and then.
I'm not familiar with those, so I'm sure I could get that information, but I'm thinking also in terms of community service for tutoring of high school students to assist with prepping for tests for middle schoolers.
Yeah, I could look into that more and ask the two committee heads and then I'll try to get back to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, next up. Moving right along.
Hi, I'm Matt Levandy. I'm the assistant principal. Jason could not be with us. He is working with Nelms to go, he's up in the Gardner area. So they asked him to come in and do, because we are a spotlight school, to look at another school and see if they can get it, give advice on that. So he's up there for 3 days. So he took that opportunity. So I will be presenting tonight. Great. We will start with grade 6 ELA. Our student growth percentile was 63.6, which was high. We had 66% of the kids in the meeting or exceeding category for achievement. And same grade, so we did it by cohort, so we will look at it, so how they did in fifth compared to sixth. So that was an 18% improvement. Looking for kids on IEPs and 504s, the SGP was a 61.6, which was also in the high. Meeting and exceeding for that demographic was 29%. That was a increase of 17% from the previous year. Sixth grade math, the SGP was typical, 59.3, so it was in the typical range. 60% of the students were in the meeting or exceeding for achievement. And compared to the previous year, that was an 11% increase. For students on an IEP or 504, the SGP was a 61.1, which was in the high. And in terms of achievement for students on IEP 504s, 26 were in the meeting or exceeding category. That was a 14% increase from the previous year. Looking at 7th grade ELA, the student growth percentile was 69.5, which again was in the high. And 72% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding category. And that was a 14% increase from the previous year. Looking for students on IEPs and 504s, the student growth percentile was 63.9, which is also in the high. And for achievement, we had 45% of those students in the meeting or exceeding, which was a +6 from the previous year. 7th grade math, The SGP was a 46.7, which was typical. 40% of those students were in meeting or exceeding, which compared to the previous year was a 2% decrease. In 7th grade math for students on IEPs and 504s, the SGP was a 47.1, which was typical. And 21% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was a +5 from the previous year. 8th grade ELA, the student growth percentile was 60.9, which was in the high range. 67% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was a +9 from the previous year. Students on an IEP or 504 were in the typical growth range of 53. And those students, 28% were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was a +11 from the previous year. 8th grade math, the SGP was typical at 51.4. 55% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding categories for achievement. That was the same as the previous year. In 8th grade, students on IEPs and 504, their growth was typical, 51.4. There 21% of those students were in meeting or exceeding category for achievement, which was a +7 from the previous year. And then in grade 8 science and technology, there is no SGP because the last time I took it was in 5th. So in terms of achievement, 65% were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was an 8% increase from the previous year. Again, it's a different set of students in 8th grade, so it isn't unique compared to the other tests. And then for students on IEPs or 504, 24% were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was -9 from the previous year. So looking at impressions, strengths, student cohorts on average had a 10% increase in the number of students on IEP 504s moving into the meeting or exceeding category across all grades in ELA and math. Student cohorts on average had a 13.6% increase in the number of students moving into the meeting or exceeding category in ELA. And we had a 12% increase in the number of students scoring in the exceeding category for 8th grade science and technology. Looking at some challenges, grade 7 math, we had some instability in the instructional consistency during the school year. Moving forward, I'm sorry. Another challenge was to continue to strengthen supports around student writing across curriculum areas. And then getting creative around scheduling testing in order to limit interruptions for all student learning, especially with the addition of the 8th grade civics MCAS pilot, which is coming this year, which will add 2 additional tests to our testing period. And our next steps. To continue to provide structures and routine that help to support student academics and behavioral expectations. Continue to focus on removing distractions and building confidence through positive messaging and MCAS tailored activities. We'll continue to adjust tier 2 supports like Math Lab, Literacy Lab, Academic Support Center through a more data-driven approach to intervention. And then we will work with 8th grade students and staff to navigate changes to the 8th grade science and technology test, as well as the addition of the 8th grade civics MCAS. That's what I got. If you have any questions, I'm
How
ready.
much wiggle room do you have with all that scheduling? Because you've got 8th grade just gets hammered.
Not as much as you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got the science and the civics.
Yep.
With the other 3.
Yeah, so basically, they give you a month to get ELA done, and then they give you a month to get math, science, civics. Yeah, we throw some maths in there. So,
And I also, I love seeing the boomerang curves with the line graphs for grade 6 and the 7th grade ELA. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about what's happening with 7th grade math with the inconsistencies. Was that like a turnover in staff or something?
yeah, so there was a turnover of staff. There was an unexpected exit during the school year. So we had to fill that with a long-term sub. We have since made a hire that we're very excited about, and from parent feedback we've had this year, it seems to be going very well.
It's great. And your sixth grade team is rocking it.
They're doing a very good job.
And I was a little worried about eighth grade eighth grade math, I mean, that they're, seem to be kind of plateauing out, but do you think that's just that cohort, or do you think there's instructionally a challenge there?
That would be the current ninth grade.
Yeah.
I think they, again, through COVID, they had some, instructional inconsistencies for a little bit, and I think that had an effect on them. I think eighth grade, Miss Manheimer did a great job with them and got them back to square.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just the one to keep an eye on right now. Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you.
So if I was to look at the grade 8 math slide for 2023 and the grade 7 math slide for 2022, I'm looking at the same cohorts, right? And I'm just looking at the same students.
No, you would be looking at.
I'm not. 7th graders last year, now 8th graders this year.
Oh, sorry. The 8th graders this year, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was accurate, that's how the information is presented.
No, so the information would be like, so if you're in 7th grade, it would be your 6th grade compared to your 7th grade. And the 8th grade would be last year's 8th graders compared to where they were in 7th grade.
Did anyone else catch that?
I know what you.
Yeah.
Look at the last slide, look at the 6th grade year and now.
Yeah, like that went over my head. I guess I didn't get the response. I apologize. On the 7th grade math slide.
Yes.
Those kids
on the 2022 bar chart.
Oh, on the bar chart.
On the bar chart.
I was confused on
For
the question.
2022,
Yes,
if we were to
absolutely.
compare them, so
Yes.
basically they were, 55% of the student body was meeting or exceeding the 7th grade math level.
Yes.
And then we worked our tails off and had 180 days of school. And now 56% of them are meeting, exceeding. We picked up 1%. Am I interpreting that data correctly?
I believe, yes.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify sort of as a basis for, running my own comparison of growth and achievement. I'll just kind of you started off hot with the data. The trend analysis looks great. The scores are good. And then we kind of run into the 7th grade math thing where, the high school was experiencing 35% above state average. The 6th graders, were in that range as well. And 7th grade math is, 2% above state average. And I guess it goes to show you how important the staff really is and what a difference that can make. And being a small district, smaller, when we have an interruption, it can send ripple waves, through sort of the consumption of curriculum. So
I 100% agree. And it would be noted that that particular cohort of students had interrupted 6th grade as well.
Yeah.
It was a lot of change for them.
Yeah, especially on the math side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my daughter's.
Yeah.
And there was like no math teacher for the whole year.
Yeah, that's rough. Well, hopefully we continue to provide those students additional support so that they can continue to make progress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And currently in 8th grade, we have 6 sections of math to actually reduce math sizes.
Okay, great.
So that's helping. And actually looking at math testing for this year, 84% of the kids scored in the average range or higher.
Excellent.
So that was really nice to see.
Good. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it's important to remember 3rd graders are taking this for the first time. And this particular group of 3rd grade, although I promise every time I get up there, I'm not going to say it. But if we remember where these children were in 2nd grade, 1st grade, and kindergarten, we know what was going on with COVID during that time. So our 3rd grade results, there's no SGP as it's the first time they're taking the test. Our students meeting or exceeding was 56%, which was down 8% from the previous year. Our students on IEPs and 504s, again, no SGP, meeting or exceeding was 13%. And compared to the previous year was down 34%. I think it's important to address that scary negative 34% number right away. I had alluded to this
several meetings ago in sort of referencing the partially meets. And that's, I'll get to that in the next steps portion, but it's really important to just keep in mind that because the number is negative, doesn't mean that those students did not meet expectation. They just fell out of the meeting or exceeding category into the partially meets. And that's for Russell Street, really important for us. The reality of third grade ELA, and I'm sure the third grade team would want me to say this, is only one student in the entire third grade did not meet expectation in ELA, just one. They quite literally celebrated with cider and snacks after school because they were so delighted with the third grade results for ELA. Next slide, please. So third grade math, again, no SGP, meeting or exceeding was 51%, down 6% from the previous year. Meeting or exceeding for IEPs and 504s was 13%. Again, the scary number, down 39% from the previous year. Again, looking at the partially meets category as students fell out of the meeting or exceeding down into partially meets. Next slide, please. In grade 4, we can see that our results got a little bit better. So our SGP was 52.3, which is typical growth. Meeting or exceeding was 60% compared to the previous year, up 5%. SGP for IEPs and 504s was typical, 48.7%. Meeting or exceeding was 40%, up 16% for the previous year. So we're happy to see a trend in the upward position from third grade into fourth grade. Next slide, please. In fourth grade math, SGP 54.4, which is typical, meeting or exceeding 62%, which is up 12% from the previous year. The SGP for IEPs and 504 is 47.8, which is typical, meeting or exceeding 43%, which was up 22% from the previous year. So again, we can see a positive trend as kids move from grade 3 into grade 4. Next slide, please. In grade 5, our numbers even get better. 48.2 typical SGP for ELA, meeting or exceeding 58%, which compared to the previous year was up 10%. SGP for 504s and IPs, 52.2%, which is typical. Meeting or exceeding for students on IPs and 504s was 31%, up 19%. Again, positive growth. Next slide, please. For grade 5 math, SGP was 60.4, which is high. Meeting or exceeding 58%, up compared to the previous year, up 9%. IEPs and 504s, 50.3 SGP, meeting or exceeding 21%, which was up again 9% from the previous year. Next slide, please. In fifth grade science, so no SGP, it's the first time they do science. Meeting or exceeding was 64%, which was up 1% from the previous year. Meeting or exceeding for IEPs and 504s, 33%, which was up 3% from the previous year. Next slide, please. So when we look at the Russell Street, the impressions from Russell Street are strengths. Were similar to our strengths the previous year. Test participation rates were extremely high. The students demonstrated typical growth in all areas. Third graders did especially well in ELA and math. As I indicated, only one student did not meet expectations in ELA. Our fourth graders did well in math, and our fifth graders did well across the board, actually. Our challenges, again, grade 3 students are taking the test for the very first time. Scope and sequence of curriculum to cover content prior to MCAS tests. We talked about that before. It's just a challenge. It is important to note, and I noted this last year as well, the percentage of our grade levels who are students on 504s and IPs, 25% of grade 3, 26% of grade 4, and 29% of grade 5. That is significant. Another challenge is focusing on the right testing accommodations for each student. There's a lot of debate within the staff about accommodations. Should third grade have any, since they're taking the test for the very first time? We do allow accommodations for students, obviously, and we want to kind of target the correct ones and also
have students practice with those accommodations throughout the year, so it's not a surprise to them how to use an accommodation or whatever they're working on when the MCAS test comes up in the spring, as was already indicated. And scheduling the MCAS test is always a challenge. We do at Russell Street have a significant number of students who have testing accommodations, and so while we would like to be able to schedule more testing on the same days and kind of condense our test window, our staff runs thin, being able to monitor accommodations in small group instruction or test monitoring. Next slide, please. So for our next steps, I'll get to that slide in a second. It was really important, I alluded to this a couple weeks ago. I wanted to talk about an exercise that we did on an early release day, where, as you indicated, teachers were all given the information. They were able to go in and look at item analysis and look at the actual essays that kids wrote in all of their writing responses. They can look at the actual ones. And so for some of the kids, they might have skipped a question. And so you have to go, the third grade team, fourth and fifth, all sat together and look through, if a bunch of kids skipped a question, there's something to look at there. And so there was a lot of information in just analyzing the information that we had. And then we, each team kind of identified strengths and weaknesses and next steps. But we also, in looking at individual data, when the teams were together, we looked at individual students who did not do well on the test or portions of the test. And we talked about, the teams of teachers together talked about those students. And so just old school on a piece of paper with a pencil, we wrote information about those individual students. So, what are that student's strengths? What are that student's weaknesses? What is that student like? What is the other pertinent information for that student? And we filled a whole page for every one of those students. And we did this, the first week of school, and we were able to pass on those data sheets to the student, to the teacher who has that student this year. So, if the student has difficulty with writing, for example, that teacher now has a whole sheet of that says that's child's interests, things they like. So if before you really get to know the student well yourself, that, they love soccer, whatever it is, you can, use soccer as a basis for some math questions or for reading or some writing assignments to kind of cater to that student immediately. And we all felt that that was a really good exercise, and it was a way to kind of help kids right away and also give this year's teacher information about students so they can start on this right away. We also looked through the information, as I indicated. We talked about some different next steps to make improvements as we go along. So beginning in trimester 2, I think it's really important that, and we just talked about it in our staff meeting yesterday, that students, especially at Russell Street, because they're so new to taking the test, they hear MCAS, they hear that word over and over and over again. So we ask that teachers say, this is a typical MCAS question. This is similar to what you'll see in the MCAS. So when the MCAS does come around in the spring, students aren't worried that this is that big bad thing that they've heard about from somebody else, an older brother or sister. They feel really confident because they've practiced all throughout the year and they've heard about it. We want to regularly complete math problems on their Chromebooks so they learn to use the drag and drop toolbox. That was really important. A couple of years ago, we noticed that students really had a hard time with some of the tools. You have to pick up the ruler and drag it over and use it. And we realized that practicing math on the Chromebook is an important thing to do. And so that's one of our next steps. Practicing problems using a math reference sheet to make sure that those formulas and things are familiar to them all the time, not just when they take the MCAS. And in the new math curriculum into math, we're looking at ways to address content areas that were previously weak for students and where that is into math, and really thinking about, as I think somebody else mentioned,
you know, if our students did poorly in a particular area when we did item analysis, and that item is not addressed in math until 2 weeks before MCAS, we want to make sure that we move that up or change things around. So we're addressing those things, or perhaps, figure out how to address that earlier than right before the test if we know that that's an area where kids are struggling with. The numbers on the bottom I wanted to add just to kind of show a favorable trend, and that's for partially meets. And you can see in third grade, 40, so it's ELA and then math. So in third grade, 40% of students were in the partially meets category, 40%. And in partially meets, that could be one question away from meeting, or it could be one question away from not meeting, right? It's that sort of gray area on our map. But it's important to see 40% were in the partially meets in ELA and 41% in math. In third grade, when we look at that information, 37% was in the partially meets in ELA and only 31% in math. And then we look in fifth grade, 39% in ELA, 37% in math, and 30% in science. So, our hope is that that's the direction we move in. I like being last in this presentation because you can see that, third graders who begin this test, then it gets better in fourth, it gets better in fifth, and then better in sixth, seventh, and eighth. And as John said, in 10th graders are in 10th grade where it matters the most, kids pass. So that's the most important thing. And just to share briefly what's not on the slide, but a couple of the next steps that we identified. Certainly in grade 5, they want to work towards having a problem of the week. That's a practice for an open response. They noticed that that was an area of weakness, and also practice online test taking with modular assessments, as I indicated. Fourth grade wants to do some lengthier online reading assignments. I think there's some fatigue that happens with the computer when kids are reading, and they notice that as well. They want to be able to have kids use the computer for reading for extended periods of time, as the test is all done on the computer. Intentional and more frequent practice to build up gradually throughout the year in terms of accommodations, allowing students to use them regularly and not just seeing them for the first time during MCAS. Teach strategies early so that kids get used to them, and find a balance for test anxiety, really not stressing with kids that we want them to do their best. But that, this test is really a tool for us to help learn how to teach them. And then in grade 3, there was a lot of next steps, but to use exemplars for open responses and constructed responses, and for math to find perhaps some supplemental materials for rounding, which was that could happen during our win block, which rounding was a particular area of weakness that they noticed in the item analysis. That's all. Any
Excellent.
questions?
Questions from the committee?
I'm really grateful that you're doing the item analysis. I just think that's so powerful, and that you are using that, to take these data points and realize that they're real life little human beings. And, all that work you're doing to try to create a learning profile for the students that are struggling. That's just, it's so human, that is just really impressive. And quick clarification, I know you just talked about this, but you've got the new math curriculum. Are the scores here after 1 year of the students having it, or this is their first year?
This would be the first full year, right? So this year coming up will be the first.
Okay,
full
so these
year of
scores that
them
we're
having
looking
had it
at
last year
are from the old program.
They had
They have 1 year of the new program
for these
for
schools.
2023, because we implemented it the fall of last year, and then the students tested in the spring.
Okay.
So they do have that 1 year.
Because you were getting a little, positive trend, so that was kind of exciting to see the impact of a new curriculum.
Right, and I think that what we did talk about with the new curriculum is where we might be able to move some things around, where kids really struggle to have that be take place a little bit sooner, so they have more time with it.
And one more question. I know that you're looking at a early literacy adoption this year, so some of this data actually may be informative with that as well. It's maybe you've already analyzed it with your item analysis, but you could identify areas where all students are struggling or all students are doing well, so it can, maybe help refine your search for a new deal. Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for the presentation. All good. Okay. Seeing as it's 9:19, we'll continue we'll table crisis go and we'll just put that on a future agenda if that's okay with everybody.
It's not a crisis.
It's not a crisis. We dealt with the crisis. Okay. So that wraps up the presentation portion of the evening. We'll just pause for a moment and see if there is any other interested citizens, second opportunity here. Okay, awesome. We'll wrap up with subcommittee reports and then I'll do it. So PMBC is the first one.
PMPC, we have not met since our last school committee meeting, so I actually don't have an update on this high school roof. That's done. That would be
The high school roof is done. There's a couple of very minor issues, they're related to the project, but not to the roof itself. So some piping coming through the walls and stuff like that we have to take care of, but the roof itself is done. Yes, so that's good.
Perfect. Budget subcommittee doesn't have anything to report. We've had some scheduling conflicts. Jen was joking earlier today that the only time I talk to her, she's either in an airport or in a taxi or something. So it's been hard to
next Tuesday.
It's been hard to get everybody together, but yeah, we'll have something to report shortly.
Right, and there is a Schcmte building committee meeting coming up as well. I don't remember the date off the top of my head, but it's coming up. So
yeah,
we did get approval from the MSBA to move forward with the OPM that the selection committee had selected. So we're moving forward with that process. Having a committee meeting to take a formal vote to then sign the contract with the OPM, and then we can start the actual feasibility study portion of that project. So things are starting to move forward. Sorry, I didn't mean to backtrack, but
thank you.
Forward track, that's okay. We'll go a little out of order. Is there anything else from the Schcmte building committee?
I think that
that covers it.
Yeah.
All right, and then we've got some work here by the policy subcommittee. So I'll turn that over to.
It's actually been on and I.
Oh.
We're asking for a first reading of the policies that you have before you. Very minor changes. First, it's just a first reading. If you have any questions, you can email or myself, or we can just take it up during the next session when we'll be asking for a second reading.
Can I ask a quick question about it? So who is our school attorney?
We have actually two attorneys, one for special education and one for regular education. So
The reason I ask is I was reading these policies, and the school attorney policies specifies that it's a man. Could we change the language to make it a little more gender?
well, that's what we're trying to do. So if we miss something, please tell us. We're making a concerted effort to get rid of the gender and genderism.
Yeah.
In these policies.
Just to assume that, we can only have a man as our.
Yeah, if we miss something, just our apologies that we're trying to eradicate all of that.
Yeah.
Where does it say? He just in the
It's always using he pronouns.
Yeah, we'll catch it. We'll check that again.
Need a petition to fix that.
Yep.
I didn't see any other than that. I thank you for bringing that to our attention. So if you want to make that one adjustment, I didn't have any questions or comments as it relates to this. So just sort of to enter into the minutes. I know they're published, but want me to make the motion?
Sure.
Yeah, I suppose you can.
I can.
So I'll move to accept the first reading of the following modified policies. It's BDFA, BEC, and BEDB.
Second.
So motion made and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Hearing none. So we'll record that as a first reading and we'll revisit those, I believe, next school committee meeting for second reading. And then there's, did anyone have any questions about BDF, BDG, BE, BEDB? Okay, so there's just a differentiation here because those, the first ones were I guess these are both policies, right? So I'll make a motion to accept the first reading of the following policies as current. So I guess these ones don't have any changes. Other than the male pronoun. So it's BDF, BDG, BE, BEDD. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, hearing none, mark that as unanimous. And we will also hear those for a second reading in our next school committee meeting.
Thank you.
All good. Perfect. Slightly awkward. If there's no other business before the school committee, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion made to adjourn,
Second.
seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have adjourned.